fun. We're bringing the thunder. We are Funder. Flesh and blood down under. Whoop! Lucky 13. Episode 13. Who have we got tonight?
One of Australia's best fab players.
Possibly the best Flesh and
Possibly.
blood player in Australia.
Don't tell Hayden.
Well, that's actually my first question. Roy, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Yes, that's right. His name is Roy.
In your opinion, Roy, who is currently Australia's best Flesh and blood player?
I mean, there's so many good players in Australia, right? Like, it's hard to really pick one out. I mean, your most well-known players, obviously, players like Hayden, Nick Butcher, like, they're all great players. I mean, like, Phil's a really good player as well.
An incredible brewer, I've found.
Yeah,
He has
absolutely.
a very good skill at making decks.
Yeah, absolutely. We were chatting, I think, pre-Pro Tour, and we were just talking about this, and he feels like he's a better deck builder than a player, and I feel like I'm the reverse. So, and we do a lot of testing together, so it works out really well for us.
What's good about Phil is he's always open. Like, he will just build you a deck. He doesn't care.
Yeah.
He doesn't have, like, secret sauce. Like, if he's got a good deck in his head, he'll send you a list.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. Because it also helps him test his ideas.
Yeah, totally.
But who do you think is the best player? Like,
If
by
you-
the way, this isn't like a... Let me explain.
Okay.
Like you said, I let me say my opinion, and then you can answer the question in a softer way. I think Hayden performs the best because of he's a very good player, clearly can build a deck, but also temperament-wise, he can go in a tournament, last the whole tournament, stay positive, because I've seen him tilt in round one and win. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but I'm saying raw talent, like even in an armory, who are you actually the most scared to play against?
Oh, that's a tough one. Okay, let's say, I won't say Hayden. Aside from that,
Yep.
I'll just go with Sydney because
Yeah,
he's
our
the
group,
place
yeah.
most familiar. I'll go with Phil,
Yeah?
honestly.
Whoa. Okay, there you go, Phil.
What about, so let's talk, because you've been to most of the big events. Last Nationals, what was your hardest game aside from the finals? In CC, forget draft, because that's not a real
Yeah,
format.
yeah.
No.
I mean, it wasn't a very wide meta at
No.
the time. So I think, how many CC games were there throughout? It was like about,
It was CC draft.
not including top 8, I think there was about 6 to 8 CC games. And I think, aside from one of them, all my opponents were playing Briar.
Okay.
So I'm not,
You were on Bravo, for those who don't remember.
yes, the infamous Don't Attack Bravo.
Sorry, you were, you weren't on Bravo. You're on Oldham. What am I
Oldham.
talking about? The other
Oldham.
Guardian.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Not Bravo.
So your accolades include Australian national runner-up. You lost to Hayden in the final. You've top-8'd Auckland calling.
Yep.
Plus you've won, I don't know how many local tournaments around here. Or
Too
you're
many.
always, too many to name. You always seem to be in the top 8 or top 4. You won quite a prestigious one recently down at Grimdark Gaming.
you did,
You had a rematch with Hayden in the final for the 1K event.
which was Oldham versus Viserai
Yep.
again.
Yeah, exact same heroes. It was fun.
Different builds.
Different builds, I mean, different meta,
Yes.
different cards available. No Scalata, which definitely helped my chances a lot.
There's a reason it's banned.
Yeah.
How many Pro Quests have you won?
Not too many. I've topped 8 quite a few. But
You
I
don't
think
travel
only-
too much to play, do you?
No, just whatever's in Sydney.
Yeah, because Phil will jet set around, went
Yeah.
Tassie and ACT and stuff. So you really only play in the local.
Occasionally, I'll go to Canberra.
Yes.
But aside from that, honestly, I just can't be bothered.
Well, tell us about, I'm curious. I think I know what you do for work, but because I think it's very interesting. You may not think so. What do you do for work? What keeps you busy?
I'm sorry.
You're fine. By the way, we forced him to come. He said he had a cough. Like, he's not sick. It's just he's had this lingering cough. I'm like, you have to come.
So I'm a data scientist by trade. Currently, I'm working in a bank, and more specifically, I work in e-com surveillance. E-commerce being electronic communication, so
Yep.
stuff like emails and chats. So a lot of what we call NLP involved, which is short for natural language processing. So effectively converting words to numbers, so then you can run machine learning algorithms and try and predict things or try and catch things out.
See, this is why I've never beaten him in a game.
Explain to me what a data scientist is. Data scientist, like for just a layman like myself. What exactly is that title? What?
I mean, a lot of people have different, well, not people, but a lot of companies think of it as a different thing, but in a very broad way. When you think of a data analyst, what they do is they look at historic data and they try and draw pictures, and they look at that specifically. Whereas compared to that, a data scientist will be actively trying to predict things in the future.
Oh wow! Okay.
So that's very general. There's a lot of crossover as well. But so to give you some examples, when you go into, say, eBay and you buy something, and then you usually, once you buy something, you'll see a lot of ads or like just other items you may be interested in. That's a machine learning algorithm suggesting what you're interested in. So what they do is they look at you and they look at your demographics. They look at all the stuff that you've looked at that you're interested in. They'll try and find users that are similar to you and see what they've looked at, and then they'll go, okay, these guys, they've purchased and looked at these other things. This is what you might be interested in. So that's one use case. Another use case would be, say, agriculture. You put sensors in the soil, right? And it detects the level of rainfall, and that you try and work out basically an automated agricultural system. So when do you turn the sprinklers on to water plants? When is there enough soil, and you just stop the sprinklers, stuff like that.
Do you find that, can you attribute some of your success in Flesh and Blood to your day job? Like, do you think the way that you do your 9 to 5 and the way that you exercise your mind and those skills that you have, has that assisted you in Flesh and Blood, do you think, and make you a really strong player?
To some degrees, absolutely. What data science requires is a lot of data, which unfortunately in terms of Flesh and Blood, there just isn't. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of millions of rows of data. That's the sort of, that's what is required to make predictions. So we don't have that, so I can't quite sort of use those techniques to work out my deck building or anything like that. But in terms of just basic mathematics, probability, when I build my decks or when I'm playing, absolutely. That said, I actually, probably surprises a lot of people, but I rely on my intuition a lot when I play rather than doing the actual math itself.
Okay. And do you think, I know that we spoke on this before you played Flesh and Blood, you were quite a prolific board game player. Yep. And, living card games, all sorts of games, but never TCGs, but you did play a lot of games. Do you think that is where you may have got that intuition around gaming from?
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't play much Magic competitively, but I played a lot of games from Fantasy Flight.
Okay. Right.
So the LCGs, some viewers might know it, like Netrunner, Legend of the Five Rings, Game of Thrones, stuff like that. So played a lot of those games, and that definitely helped. I mean, there's definitely a lot of skills that cross over, but the games themselves are naturally very different.
I think when we talk to Phil, he's doing his constructed class thing. There's stuff you can learn. Intuition, there's people that are just better at that. Like whether it's also understanding the opponent's game plan, or even just guessing correctly. Like I play Dory. There's certain players that can actually just read my hand. Like Phil is one of them. Like he's very likely to guess from what I've pitched, quickly check my graveyard and just know if I'm trying to go wide or tall.
I mean, intuition at the end of the day is your experience, right? So the more you play,
the better it gets.
The better it gets. And the more specific it is, the better it gets. The quicker it gets.
So Timmy's need to put in reps. That's what you're telling me, Roy?
Yeah, absolutely. But still have fun, right?
Yeah. Before I forget, Flesh and Blood Online. You see this stuff on Twitter a lot. The data's there. It's being built. It's coming. So these online. So TTS doesn't do it well, but Felt Table and Flesh and Blood Online both publish data sets, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hopefully, especially if pro players start to use those tools to test more, because the data stays anonymous, I believe.
Yeah.
It would be great because then you start actually seeing, because it's got win rates for cards and it's got, decks that play this card have a slight edge over the same deck without that card. Like, that's the data that, yes, can answer a lot of questions that you have to guess when you deck build without actually looking at a million games played and go, oh, okay, Command & Conquer is as good as we think. Or the opposite, it's a must-have. Like, we don't really know. We sort of know from playing it that it feels good.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I actually want to do, I just, again, just work and personal life, haven't gotten around to it, but I would really like to build sort of like a simulator in terms of just deck building. It's not so much which card has a higher win percentage, but more just your ratios. Like, if I'm playing Oldham, for example,
how many blues
am I going to draw in a hand? And on second cycle, with certain assumptions, maybe I use one red. Maybe I use half my reds on the first cycle. How that changes the deck structure and what my probability is going into second cycle and so forth. Or even just specific cards, right? Like, I want a 2-cost attack that's a popper. So like your Brother-in-Arms and your Command and Conquers, things like that. So what's my probability of drawing one throughout the game? And just rather than using hard mats to do that, I think just running a simulator where I have all 60 cards in the deck and then just collecting stats.
So it's just drawing, discarding 4 or whatever.
Yeah.
Arsenaling 1. That's not super complicated to do, is it? Yeah.
No. So definitely something that I can do. But
I've seen some fancy spreadsheets that do that, but probably not to the level you're trying to do.
Those are more stuff like hypergeometric calculators and things like that, I think. Not sure. But absolutely. It's been done in Magic.
It's above our levels for sure.
When it comes to that data, do you think that's a positive thing? Do you like having all that data available through Felt Table or Flesh and Blood Online? Or do you like things, to be kept behind closed doors? What's your opinion on that? Do you think that big data should be available? Like, if pros are testing on Flesh and Blood Online, do you think that data should be made available? Do you want that data?
Let me ask you a question in return. I mean, I don't really understand that question. Why would I not be...
Because I know in the past, look, again, I'm just drawing back to stuff that's happened in previous games, especially Magic. I know that, I think it was MTG Goldfish at one point, were tapping into Magic Online or Arena, but they were pulling a lot of data.
Yeah.
A lot of data, which in turn was making formats solved, especially standard, a lot quicker. So then I think a lot of people didn't like that, so that they didn't have access to that intricate data anymore.
I think so. I would imagine, so let's talk like Hearthstone level data. Like MTG Arena would have millions and millions and millions of players, or at least thousands, and then millions of data points. I think that can get to a point where you can get closer to perfection than a human will. The way like a chess bot would work. But what you're trying to talk about, the data, is more not to build the perfect deck necessarily. It's more tuning.
Yeah, exactly.
Like rather than do 1,000 reps on a deck yourself till it feels good, get the program to do 1,000 reps and tell you your ideal number is 7 poppers and 34 blues. That's what you're trying to figure out, right?
Yeah.
But then that kind of answer just makes the game less variant. Like if every Oldham played the right amount of blues and poppers, for instance, they would just have less variance, right? Like they would suffer less from bad hands.
And honestly, that's the main reason why I play Oldham, just because of the lowest variance deck that I can find. And I mean, I like playing control, don't get me wrong, but I also like playing more aggressive decks. I like mid-range decks as well, to take turns from Magic. but
It's consistent.
yeah, like I find that if something can go wrong for me, it will always go wrong. So I just try and find the most consistent.
Man, I play warrior. Like you can't, you're having the best game, then you draw all reds. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, sir, have tempo back. My deck just killed me. The amount of times I've lost to just complete variance, like either all blues or all reds, or your deck has 24 attack reactions and you draw absolutely none of them.
Yeah,
Would you think that you're a stronger, with that in mind, like you prefer playing a constructed deck that has the least amount of variance? Do you think you're a stronger constructed Flesh and Blood player or a limited player? Because I know you are a very good limited player.
I would definitely say I'm stronger. Sorry.
That's all right.
Definitely stronger constructed player.
Okay.
My limited play is quite, well, limited. Most of which is coming from Flesh and Blood. The LCGs, I'm not sure if you guys know what that is, but it's not a tradable card game, right? So it's like a board game expansion.
It's like all the pieces are there, right?
Yeah, so there were modules where you can do drafts, or that some people do make cubes, so you do play draft, but that's sort of on the side. The main thing is constructed, and that's sort of where a lot of my experience comes from.
Talk to us about how you got into Flesh and Blood.
exactly what I was
I
gonna
love
ask.
this story. I've heard it before, but geez, it is a very fun story. Talk to us about how you got introduced to Flesh and Blood and how you played your first games. I love this.
So this was literally the night before the first Sydney calling, I believe. My mate, one of my good friends, Kenny, also a very good board game player / TCG player, just called me up and said, hey, there's this new TCG coming out. Do you want to learn it? There's a big event tomorrow. It was like 1K price, whatever it was, can't remember now. And said, like, do you want to go check it out? And I said, sure, why not? So went to his place. I think the event was sealed. So that's sort of what we did. He went through the rules with me, and we did one sealed game. So we opened 6 packs each. I think I actually opened a cold foil Mask of Momentum that night.
Oof.
It was worth what, $80 at the time?
At the time,
Yeah.
I had no idea that was like a rare card. I just sort of saw it like, oh, this looks really nice. Chuck it
Shiny.
aside.
Yeah.
Did you play Ninja? And did you build a Ninja deck? All
Yeah,
right.
so I built Ninja with Kenny's help building the deck. Got absolutely crushed, and still had no idea what Katsu's ability did. Just because I was tired, I was sleepy, I was lazy. I can't be bothered reading the cards.
Says it attacks for 3.
Yeah, awesome. So that was my experience, and then I jumped into the Calling Sydney.
The very next day.
The very next day. So my second game, or probably third game of Flesh and Blood was the Calling Sydney. And basically lost every single game. I think I might have won one game. No, I don't think I won a single game. I lost all 7 games. I joined a side event, lost another 3 games there. And I think for the Calling, I built a Katsu deck because that's what I built the night before. And it was just this belittle minimalism deck. So it's just a lot of 3 cost go again, +3, come in attack, that kind of thing. And after that, I was like, not a bad game. Not sure how I feel about losing 9 games in a row, but
Yeah, what drew you into the game after you've just gone to an event and lost 9 games in a row? Like, what was it? Was it the art? Was it the mechanics?
It was the mechanics, and honestly, a large part of it was because my mate Kenny was getting into the game, and I wanted to just go along for the ride. So decided to keep playing the game, bought I think another 2 booster box at the time, and proceeded to lose the next 15, 20 games. I think I lost about 30, 40 games before I actually won a single game.
To your friend. You were playing against your friend
Yeah,
Kenny?
Kenny.
And what was his connection to the game again? I remember you telling me
I
this.
believe he's family friends with James White.
That's right,
Yeah,
yes.
yes.
So he had a very good understanding of the game.
He's just a phenomenal board game / card game player. He picks things up really fast. So he was, I think he topped 8 that calling as well.
So paint the picture. your friend that basically friends with James White, very early with the game, phenomenal player. You learn how to play the night before the calling. You go to the calling, lose 9 matches. You can proceed to buy some boxes and hang out with Kenny and play another 30 games against someone that's just top 8 the first calling, phenomenal player. You've lost 30, but you're essentially training against one of the best. Do you think that is what gave you that great foundation in the game?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody learns in a different way, right? A lot of people are very methodical and they sort of read every single card, ask a lot of questions, whereas my approach, partly because I'm a little bit lazy sometimes, I just like to get a lot of reps in and just get that intuition going, and from there I'll start doing more of the thinking post getting the intuition. So a lot of the way I think in games is just led by my intuition. So I might go, I think this is a good play. Why is it a good play? Why is it a bad play? Then I'll start doing thinking. I like to get my reps in before I sort of start delving into the details, where some amazing players, actually a lot of the amazing players, they tank and they think about every single thing and they really learn the game.
So I'm more like you. And maybe it doesn't translate, but I keep telling better players than me that don't top 8 as often as me, is you're better, but you overthink. Well, I'm more likely to tell myself I don't care if I win, but if you'd brought a CC deck, I'd want to do 4 matches in an hour. If it took us an hour to do one, I shut off my brain. I'm like, that's enough. I need to play and then make the mistakes and then just know where I fucked up and then try not to repeat it. It probably comes from doing jiu-jitsu, even basketball. You want to get better at free shots. You have to stand on the line, and just shoot. You can't, someone can show you the technique a little, but nothing beats shooting 1,000 free throws. Nothing beats that. Your knowledge goes up, your muscle memory builds in.
Absolutely, and I think that's exactly where I get it from as well.
Yeah,
just BJJ.
Yeah, so it turns out that we have some BJJ people. None of us knew. I don't know why we don't have.
No, I know Roy's done kickboxing. You've done some amateur fights,
but I don't care about kickboxing.
I do. Roy's a silent assassin.
Tell us about your MMA, your martial arts stuff.
So back in uni, I started with just basic Chinese martial arts, and very quickly from there, I just moved into kickboxing, and I did that for quite a number of years. And at some point, I did BJJ, got up to blue belt, but decided to focus on kickboxing. And for next good 5 to 6 years, I just focused on kickboxing, and that's where I did most of my competing. At some point, my coach retired. Just cut the story really short.
Sure, yeah.
So I decided to not continue kickboxing, and from there I just jumped back into grappling. So BJJ and freestyle wrestling, that sort of stuff.
Wow.
So at that time, it was close to COVID time, I think it was. I was aiming to try and get my purple, but COVID hit, so stopped all my momentum and just back to square one now.
I feel the same because of an injury and COVID. I'm never going to get a stripe on my blue belt. But to be honest, there's something to be said about loving it regardless. So I think the people that make it to black don't care. Most of them.
Yeah.
I think that's, if you're doing it for the belt, you probably will never get the belt. It's very, very hard to learn anything between blue and purple because you can't feel it. You can't look and go, I feel like a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. There's no such thing. And usually if you're in the same gym, and this probably relates to Fab a little, everyone's learning as you learn. So you're actually getting better. Your coach probably notices that you stopped giving up mount too easily, but for you, everyone's got better as you got better. Some people even quicker. And you're like, oh, man.
I think and the main difference between people who improve quicker and not as quick is a lot of people tend to go back to their old patterns, so they don't try to do anything new.
Yeah.
Right. Especially when you get to say blue belt, you're known to be a decent wrestler. You don't want to go up against a white belt and sort of try something new and get caught, and it's like an ego thing, right?
But
Like
you can't
just
have that.
You can't have that. And if you just go back and just keep doing your old thing, like we were talking about reps.
Yeah.
Yes, like reps help, but at some point you need to move on from that. And if you just keep doing the same thing over and over, it just you're not going to improve.
Especially with bad habits. Like it's detrimental if you have a bad habit and then you keep repeating. So jiu-jitsu, and this does relate to Fab, very high level guys and girls tend to either handicap themselves or purposely, like they go into a session and go, I'm going to try and land triangles because it's my weakest move.
Yeah.
So rather than going in and going, I'm going to win as much as I can, they go in, I've been not doing triangles very well. I'm going to like practice triangles in a competitive environment. So they'll go in and they can catch you in 10 other submissions, or they can out wrestle you or whatever, but they'll never go back. Like they'll never go to the back, which is their natural. They always want to take back. They just stop doing that. They pull guard. They try and shoot triangles. And they try till they learn it themselves. So they use you as a training dummy.
Yeah.
Fab, I think people that are one tricks or they only ever play aggro, one of the best things they can do is go play Oldham.
Well, that's why I started playing Bravo. Because
it
I wanted to change the way.
your mind.
Yeah, I wanted to change the way my
Yeah.
brain worked. Because when I started playing Bravo, I'm like, this is so unnatural to me.
Yeah.
But I thought I just need to persevere to try and unlock some different skill set and way I approach the game. Now, I'm not there yet, but that was my whole reason for picking up Bravo.
Absolutely. And that's why I like trying to play different decks, although I seem to be known to be the Oldham player. But you can be more specific than that as well, right? Like you might go, okay, I'm not good at stacking my decks, so
Play decks at shuffle.
and they play decks at shuffle or whatnot, but you can just spend your time, play games which require you to stack a deck and just work on it. Like it won't be easy, right? And it might take a long time for you to get it, or it might take less time. But point is, you need to sort of put in those reps and get that skill down.
And the worst thing you can do is you will know, like when you now sit across from a Bravo, your comfort zone is so much better. You're like, I know exactly.
Yeah.
And you'll notice they've got 2 floating or they've got 2 in hand and an arsenal. So they could be a pummel. Like you start seeing, and like anyone that loses to Dory a lot, I always tell them, I'm like, borrow my deck.
Yeah.
You play the deck for a week and you'll know exactly what I have in my hand. Because you're like, oh crap, most of the time it's 3 damage attack reaction with a reprise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when you see it, when you pilot, it's very, very, it's a good learning experience.
And just jumping quickly back to the deck stacking example, I think a lot of people don't end up learning the skill because they give up too quickly. They might try it for a few weeks and go, oh, you know what? I keep forgetting my stack within the next 5 turns. I'm just not smart enough, or I'm just not good enough, and they give up. But you just need to spend the time and just accept those losses and not be too bothered by it.
What's your secret? Some tips,
My
like how, because do you pitch stack?
No,
I can't remember my pitch stack. Some things I do, like if I have a Fable in my deck, I'll have some sort of recollection, but I'm not remembering what's after it. It just reminds me that I'm in my second.
Actually, no, in Limited, I do sometimes. Like, I don't stack my pitch, but I try and sometimes pitch a card that intuitively the Timmy inside of me wants to swing with. I'll be like, okay, maybe I'll sacrifice something this turn and I'll pitch it for later. That's about as in-depth as my...
Do you have some broad level... So okay, one thing I'll ask, a legit question from me, because it's something I think I'm doing wrong. On Dory, when I play, I tend to go, I want to pump as much damage as I can, right? Because I'm racing most of the time in this meta. Do you consciously forget? I think Oldham's probably different because you can actually deck people out. Dory, I can't deck people out usually. Are you like consciously doing what Paul said, which is you've got an Iron Song response and they give you a reprise, but in your mind go, you know what? I'm gonna pitch that into my gloves so that I get it when it's more important. Like, do you make sure the bottom of your deck is not all reds every game all the time? Is that something we should all be doing?
I mean, that's definitely something that I do. I don't know if I'd say it's something that everyone should be doing for all decks.
Fi
It
wouldn't
really
have to, I
depends.
imagine. Like that nature
mean-
of deck where it's a 3-4 turn game usually,
If you're playing Fi against Oldham and they're
you would
able-
have to, right?
Yeah, you would
Yes.
have to. And it really depends on how the game's going, right? Like if you're pushing enough damage through, you might go, you know what, let's just push as much as we can, and the last few points of damage will get through.
Okay. That brings me to a very good question then. Phil told me you're the best person that reads the game, as in you can tell how the game's going and adapt to it very quickly, which is, I think, a higher level skill. It probably comes from intuition where you go, you're realizing you're not pushing enough damage compared to the amount of cards you're using or defend. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you can switch. Talk about it like a flow chart, because I think you do some of that stuff for a living. What questions, like for a basic level, are running through your head when you're playing a game? So you play around, they pass to you. What do you actually ask? You know, you're looking at the line you can play, and is that the right line, or But is there then another series of questions where you're going, do I pitch for later? Like, how are you reading board state or the game state to pivot mid game or decide to change tact?
I'll talk about it from an Oldham
Sure.
perspective. On a very base level, I'm just trying to optimize my turns every turn, right? I try to take no damage. I use my cards efficiently to block. That's the basics of it, right? And from there, it's understanding what my opponent's trying to do, what his game plan is. Like, is he trying to push damage, or is he trying to build up damage and go? A good example would actually be my game against Hayden more recently.
The OTK. Oh no, the more recent
the
one.
more recent one.
Okay.
So at the start of the game, Hayden wasn't attacking as much. He was building up rune chance to be able to push through damage against Oldham, because I think, generally speaking, Oldham will be able to block out if Viscera just goes aggro. So given that, my game plan is then just to try and disrupt him and attack, because he's not attacking. And in a sense, it's quite easy, because he's not attacking. I have cards in my hand. I can attack, right? It's a pretty straightforward thing. So I was prioritizing my my Command and Conquers, my Pummels, to get rid of cards out of his hand and make sure that he can't generate rune chance fast. So at some point, Hayden notices that's what I'm doing. So he goes, okay, I can't wait any longer.
You got to go aggro.
I have to go aggro. So then it took me, actually, in this particular game, took me a little bit long to realize. I was still trying to get some damage through while he started attacking again. But basically, at that point, that means I had to switch and go back to a more defensive gameplay where the game ended with me decking Hayden out.
Yeah.
So again, base level, just optimizing. Second level is understanding what my opponent is trying to do, what their game plan is, and just trying to work around that. And I guess this is pretty high level. Like, I never know what high level, low level is.
No,
but
just say it. People can figure out if they understand. Both of us are pretty low level. It's fine.
Very low level. Down in the weeds.
But just at a very broad, intuitive level, next thing I would look at is just understanding the construct of my deck as the game goes on. So the number of reds, the number of blues, the number of specific cards, so Pummels, Command and Conquers, the number of 3 or lower cost attacks if I'm playing my particular build of Oldham, and the number of, if I'm playing against Prism, then the number of poppers, that sort of stuff. So understanding what's left in my deck and how I
Because
can
you might
pitch in.
have to go aggro because you got no poppers left. So
Yeah.
if you let Prism just run free, you might get run over. That kind of thing.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
So to simplify, you're asking yourself what's the most optimal thing you can do with your cards.
Yes.
But that's technically based off what you think the opponent's doing and whether you want to optimally block and deal some damage, or optimally
Stack
how
my
aggressive
deck,
you
yeah.
can be, or stack.
So I might draw into a bad hand where I have a no block and 3 2 blocks.
Yeah.
3 of which are pummels, right? So how
Correct.
do I deal with that? Like, do I still try to optimally block and reduce damage in this turn, or do I try and pitch as many of those cards as I can
And get that
from
value
pound to
back
grab?
later.
Yeah, so depends on how I think the game will end there as well, right? So if I feel like Hayden towards the end of the game is going to be attacking aggressively, I'm not going to be using those pummels, right? So those 2 blocks is going to come back and bite me.
Yeah. This is now high level, little bit high level, because I've never thought that far in a hand. Is how will the game end, right? Like, where will what will this look like? But I think if you ask that question, you could come up with some answers. Like, I know against Bolton how the game will look in the end.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? He's going to go for a combo.
And
There's some decks which is obvious, but you're right. Some decks is not always that obvious. Prism, if they're building auras, it's obvious what the end game looks like.
So do you find that's one of your strengths, navigating the end game? Because I hear the card guys, big shout out, love what you do. They talk about it a lot. The great players out there have a very, they know how to navigate. They've got a very good, solid understanding of the end game. When the resources are low, you know, out of equipment, you know, things are quite limited.
I don't know if I'd say that's something that sets me apart. Like, personally, I don't feel like I'm a great player per se. I feel like I'm above average.
Above average? Come on, Roy. Jeez, if you think that you're only just above average, there's no hope for any of us.
But I feel like these are just easy things that everyone can do as well. It's just not something that people would necessarily do when they're new to gaming per se. And it's also something that even if you realize it's something you should do or that could be good for you to do, it's a matter of habit, right? So
I was going to say it's hard to remember to do it.
yeah. So again, back with the drilling conversation we were having earlier, you can make your next month's worth of armory games or your playtesting games. This is what I'm going to do. Every turn I'm going to ask this question first thing, and then I'm going to go and proceed to play my game normally. Or obviously it might have some impact, but then proceed to play my game. So trying to build that habit, which is, again, very hard, but it just requires reps.
Perenine, Delia had a good point. It doesn't apply to me, but it's I understand what he's doing. He can get a bit tilted when he plays. So one of the things he does is, at the start of every round, he goes, am I neutral? Trying to get away from that headspace of he could be negative or come across as negative, right? Which is important if you're going to perform well and you have a problem with getting angry or tilted. That's the first thing you should be telling yourself is, do you know what I mean? I have the opposite in jiu-jitsu. I don't get the killer instinct, fight or flight, even because I know I'm not going to die, I guess, but also I just don't have that ego thing. And when I compete, I have to remind myself I need to be aggressive. Like, you can't, it's not about surviving. It's about, I got to try and kill him. Like, I got to try and break his arm. Like, I don't want to break his arm, but I have to try.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Otherwise, because I'll pull guard, and if I last for 5 minutes and the guy's bigger than me, I won.
Yeah.
But I didn't. But in my head, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
But this concept is very interesting. It's something I want to explore in my own games. Because, like, I'm going to Singapore and Lille.
Yeah.
I might even try and buy a PTI for Worlds. Like, those questions, I think, you don't see it that you're a great player necessarily, but those questions do set people apart. Because I think people play off the cuff with what they have. They play. I do that most armories. I'm not really going, pause for a second, go, is this match going to be over in 2 turns or is it a long game? Like versus Reiner, Dory versus Reiner, it's a long game compared to Dory versus Fi.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because Reiner will block me out.
But that's also the good thing, right? Like, the more you do this, the more it becomes a habit, and it becomes an intuition at the end.
It's reps added with try and build a habit in. You don't need to remember every question, but what's like the question you struggle with the most? And if it's, you always get to later stages in games and you've run out of good cards, well, you need to make your habit is which one of these can I pitch for later before you, which is what Paul was saying is.
Yeah, I've got a question. Like you said, the first thing you want to do with Oldham is you want use your cards efficiently, block efficiently. And then the second thing you said is you want to understand what your opponent's doing. I've got a question on that. How do you go about getting familiar with all the other decks? Because, I feel that the advantage that you get in Flesh and Blood from knowing what another deck is doing intimately is massive. Much more so than Magic. Like, Magic, you just have to have some sort of an idea, high-level idea of what a burn deck's doing or what a Tron deck. But you don't need to know intimately what is going on. Like, I'm sure you can, and the pros do, but I think it only gives them a 5%, maybe 10% edge. But I think in Flesh and Blood, like, for example, if you know exactly what Dory's doing inside out, like, your win percentage just goes up dramatically against the deck. So how do you do that? How do you go about...
I don't think I have anything amazing or special to say about
like,
this
do you look at
particular
deck
question,
lists,
but I mean, it's all the standard stuff, right? You look at deck lists, you play test on both sides, you watch videos of high quality play, and just it's those three things.
So you play other decks purely... So you'll play a deck into someone else piloting Oldhim? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, it's all part of testing, right?
Yeah.
And it's always good to just play all the decks just to get a feel of what they're doing, even if it's just at a very broad, basic level.
Yeah, like read the cards and play them. I found it changed. So I played before the team calling. I tested on Oldhim and I tested on Briar. It really helped. I was terrible at those decks. But then on Oldhim, I was beating Dash all the time.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? I was like, wait, this is easy because I know I'm not playing optimally, but I can see why it's a hard matchup. Yeah. And then on Briar, which is way easier to pilot than Oldhim, like the Dash matchup, like I wasn't beating Dash on Dory is what I'm saying, but Briar and the Dash felt, well, if I get the right cards first, I obliterate them. But it helps to know what that deck can do. Yeah. And you just become way less respectful of the deck because you're like, you know what it looks like, but but it's not scary because it's not unknown.
Yeah. Just changing the topic a little bit. I found it interesting you mentioned that Oldhim would have been a harder deck to pilot or play. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but personally I feel like there aren't any hard decks to play per se.
Oh, okay. I like this. Now we're getting into it.
All right, I'm just going to jump on Kano.
Here we go.
Tomorrow.
Bolton is the most complicated deck to play.
I mean, there's certainly more complicated decks, right?
I'll clarify. Oldhim has a couple of extra steps you have to think of before you play your cards. One is because your arsenal is into Crown. You know what I mean? So most decks, you're used to arsenaling your best card. Oldhim is more likely you're arsenaling your worst card or something you want later. That took extra steps in my head.
Expand that actually on that. Makes it easier though, right? Because you can arsenal any
it's
card.
An advantage. Yeah, you could put your harder final there and it goes away. But when I say hard, I'm talking about the extra. If you had a flowchart, Oldhim has a few extra questions to ask than I was used to playing. Definitely, you ask way less questions on Ira is what I'm saying. Do you know what I mean? Like a passive ability. Sure. Even Briar has a little, like you had to get over, okay, I got to play non-attack and an attack to get
I feel like if you just understand the play patterns of each deck, like it doesn't take that much to do well with that particular deck.
Oh, hard by no means. Like you could pick it up in an hour. You'll be proficient at most of these decks because the rules are all the same. Also, if you've been playing the game for longer than a month, you've probably seen the other decks being piloted. So you get a bit of an idea of the rhythm of Oldhim. It's like what Oldhim usually does is you swing and then they go, okay, Crown. Like you get a feel for what you're supposed to do.
And again, it's sort of just a lot of it comes back down to experience, right?
Yes.
And when people say a deck is hard to play, sort of what you were alluding to, there's more decisions to make. But if you're proficient with the deck, you've played it enough, then those decisions are intuitive and they don't require mental capacity.
Yeah. Which takes time. You got to put enough time in a deck to get to the point where so I've noticed there's a big difference in body language between good players and new ones or people that get stressed under pressure is how much you look at your hand and how much you look at the board.
Yeah, yeah.
So people that are looking at their hand when the enemy has priority is very odd to me, because you should be doing your best to read that information. So a lot of times I'll draw and I don't look if the other player's quick. Like I'll draw and I'm really trying to see, do they look stressed? Do they look like, do you know what I mean? Like I'm trying to see what they're doing, because I usually on Dory, like it's not going to take me long out of my 4 cards to figure out the line.
Yeah, yeah.
While vice versa is, I'd rather pick up the information of what.
That's almost like Brian Kibler-esque. He used to do the same thing in Magic. He would, because you each, geez, it's been so long
Draw at
since I
the
played it. Yeah,
end of your turn.
no,
Start of your turn.
No, so for mulliganing purposes, whoever would look at their hand first, so you both draw up your 7 cards and then decide whether you want to mulligan, but it's been so long since I played. But basically, the person who's going first, I believe, they decide first, but intuitively you'll just pick up your cards at the same time. But Brian Kibler wouldn't. He would draw his 7 cards and put them in front of him and watch his opponent.
Yep.
Studying their
There's
cards.
information.
To see whether they had a good hand or not, see if he could pick a tell.
Because that should affect if you mulligan or not. I think that's a poker thing. I don't know if he ever played poker, but I think in poker, you can look at your cards when they're dealt, but the etiquette is you leave them face down till the player who's like behind you makes a decision. Because it's sort of irrelevant if you got the best hand or not. The problem is if you look early and it's aces and you make any sort of fucking tell, it will affect the people whether they even play or not. So you're supposed to leave your cards down, wait till it's your turn, look, and then decide.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's actually something that I don't ever do. Like I actually try and avoid it. And this probably...
Avoid looking or...
You don't play the person.
I don't play the person.
Yeah.
I always just look at the probabilities and what's happening in the game itself. I try not to...
All I'm... sure. And I don't think you can play the person much in Fab, unless it's Dory or something where like you're trying to guess if they have a pummel, but most of it is very probability based.
Oh, we have a few players here, when they draw 4 bad cards, you know about it.
Which, well, we have a lot of players that lie. We have a lot of players that lie as well. They pretend they have a very bad hand and vocalize it. I got sort of lost a top 4 situation in a skirmish because the guy said it's a shit hand and then dealt 12 because I block drunk thinking he had a shit hand. It'll never happen again. What I was trying to say though, play probability. You should be looking at your opponent when they're doing something. Your hand is irrelevant.
Yeah, sure.
If they have priority, you should be focused on what are they doing.
Yep, absolutely.
Because it's also slow players are usually the ones looking at their hand when they draw it. But it's whatever you draw at the end of your turn is irrelevant right now. That's like the least amount of attention required, because what you're going to have to decide is what to do in response to your opponent. Do you know what I mean? If you have Arsenal pass, drawn 4, it's time to watch the opponent play. Because you need that information to decide. Now, again, when you're good, you can do both. You quickly check your hand. All right, I got 2. Blah, blah. Like you can, but if you can't do it in microseconds, you should focus on what's going on. I feel it made me a better player. The minute I stopped looking down, and I know every Dory card, I don't have to read any of them. I don't need to look for very long.
And I don't know how applicable this. Probably not very applicable to Flesh and Blood, but when I used to play chess, I used to go to a lot of blitz tournaments. So that's basically 5-minute games.
Oh, you play competitive chess?
Yeah, I used to play competitive chess.
Oh, wow.
I used to be a chess
Explains
coach.
everything.
Now we're getting the full picture. So we got kickboxer, chess master, data scientist. Jeez, Roy, what the hell?
Even
I told you.
they modeled Phi after. Did you know?
Yeah, he's a dead set assassin. What's in that bloody briefcase, Roy? Jeez. You're not going to... Is this drink spiked?
He's 007.
Yeah, I know. Unbelievable.
But basically, it's 5 minutes each person, and as soon as you make a move, you press your clock, and it's your opponent's time ticking down. So what I used to love doing is I would, at least for the first 5 moves or so, which usually you'd be pretty familiar with, I just make a move, and that doesn't give my opponent a chance to think. So then he has to use
the minute
his time
their
to think.
time is ticking, the pressure's on them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's sort of something that I kind of took into Oldham, where in order to make sure that I don't go to time, I would make sure to think of all the possible lines while they're playing during their turn.
While they're ticking up tunic and whatever, yeah.
Obviously, not always the case. There will be times where things get tricky and I need to think on my own time. But for the most part, my turns, even if I have like 4 cards in hand, it should be pretty quick.
Yeah.
Right. And that sort of puts pressure on your opponent as well.
I noticed that at the team calling, the speed I play Dory at, I've told, like locals have told me that I can't remember. I think it was Kevin. Kevin's like we were playing a blitz armory and he's shaking like that. And then he wins. I'm like, good work, man. He goes, man, I was so nervous. Like, I haven't beaten you before. I'm like, bro, you beat me all the time. He's like, yeah, but you're a really good player. I go, no. He goes, yeah, but you play so confidently. I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't make me good because a lot of times I'll play and then I go, fuck, I fucking wrong card, but I leave it out. But the fact that like he was a newer player at the time, that he thought I was very good because I played fast is actually a very good thing. Because the pressure's on them when they're deciding. If you get your actions out of the way and they can't deal with pressure, then it helps. I think we should have blitz timers like chess. So especially like if blitz is at Worlds, right? It makes no sense to me that it's a 30-minute game and it's not 15 minutes each. Because there's some people that tank for 5 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
And you don't, and I don't, and a lot of people don't.
I do. Sometimes.
So, but which is fine, because like, okay, when Kano tanks for 5 minutes, I completely know what they're thinking. So I understand it, because the Kano match is never a very long game. And there's a lot of like, a Kano pitch stack ends up like 12 cards. That like it's a big thing.
But you are right. I have noticed the longer I'm in the tank for, the higher probability that I misplay.
Yeah. So intuition is playing it because, okay, let me put it this way. Let's talk about chess. It works for any martial art. It works for everything.
Yeah.
Learning the basic mechanics of chess takes 15 minutes. This does that, right?
Yeah.
There's how many pieces are there? Like 8 or whatever? I don't know how many pieces in chess. Not even.
I mean, 16 pieces.
No, but how many unique movements are there? There's pawns. 6, right? There's 6 things you got to know about chess. And the win condition, right? That's the only things.
Yeah.
Like, chess is incredibly easy to learn. Once you've learned them, then you realize how complex it is. Jiu-jitsu is the same. You can learn all the basics of jiu-jitsu in a couple of weeks. Like here's how you should fall. This is like, right? But then you realize, oh shit, this is complicated. I think you should play the reps first. Especially if you ever go to time on any deck, including Oldham, you should just play more reps. And make mistakes, acknowledge the mistake, but don't ask to take it back and don't, like, do you know what I mean? Because the best way to stop making the mistakes, if you know the mechanics, is just, like, actually make it. While if you think for 5 minutes and play it, I feel like you learn it less because you don't get enough chances to correct it. Like, if you only play 3 matches a week and you overthink every turn, I don't think you learn as much as if you do your blitz game in 10 minutes. I go, can we play another one? And then you play another. Like, that's what I do in most blitz armories now is I get to a second game before people have finished. At the last draft, RTN at Canberra, I finished 2 CC games with Ryan Lewis-Johns before someone finished their draft game next to us. Why? Because we were playing for fun. Did we misplay? I don't think we misplayed that much. Do you get what I mean? Like, we playing with no stakes, and I think sometimes you just got to take the pressure off and just play and let it be. Like, let whatever happen. You might find you actually play better.
There's also the fact that, and this is the difference between, in quotes, experienced versus less experienced player and faster players and slower players, right? So your experienced players tend to be faster, and your slower players tend to be the inexperienced players. I think they did a study on this once. I think it was actually chess based as well, but basically they had inexperienced people playing chess and experienced people playing chess, and they asked these players to verbalize their thoughts as they were playing.
Right.
And you can see a very clear difference in terms of the patterns of thought. With experienced players, they'll be like, okay, so I have three options. This move, this move, this move. I'm going to think 5 moves in advance for these 3 options and choose the best one. Whereas an experienced player will be like, oh, I have 12 pieces. I'll have. Does this pawn move do anything? No, he's attacking my queen, so I'm gonna. How about this pawn? So they'll think about every single piece. They think more breadth, whereas the experienced player thinks less breadth but deeper.
Yeah.
Right. So
That's
In
interesting.
fab
That's very
terms,
interesting.
I think what you're saying is in
Very
fab
interesting.
terms, people I think do think about things they can't control,
Yeah.
or they can't, information they can't see. Like realistically, if someone's attacking you for 3 and you got 4 cards, the choice should be as easy as what do I need to pitch, and then what's the weakest card in my hand, damage wise. If you're gonna try and right, it should be fairly straightforward. Thinking your whole turn next turn is irrelevant. Like when you're just blocking a 3 attack, if you need to block it,
yeah, exactly.
And some of it is the pre-thinking, like knowing in advance if they throw a snatch at me, I'm saving my boots for the snatch. So when it happens, if you know the opponent's deck, so like Crown of Province, a great example, save that shit for a Command and Conquer. Like it's a no-brainer. If the deck in front of you plays Command and Conquer, the minute you see a Command and Conquer, you shouldn't have to think. It should be Crown, Arsenal out, take 4.
Yeah.
That should be
to a certain extent, right? There might still be a situation where you don't want to do that, but that's sort
Sure.
of where your intuition comes in. Okay, this is a situation.
But
where
you're
I
like,
wanna
you know what,
do
it's better
CC.
to lose my art.
Yeah.
Sure.
But yeah, I agree
But there's
with
like
the point.
90% of the time, Crown into
Yeah, exactly.
is the most optimal. Some of those decisions should be made pre-game. I mean, on Warrior, it's easy. We have this fridge. You need to like settle with yourself before you play that this is going in front of on hits.
Yeah.
Versus Prism, I should never block unless it's an error edition. Like there's some of these decisions you should have in mind.
Yeah, yeah.
And yes, it takes some experience.
Yeah, so again, seems like the theme of the night, but coming back down to reps. If you're a slower player and that's something you're trying to improve, then just getting those reps in definitely helps.
So when you were playing against your family friend Kenny and you've 20, 30 games deep, yet to win a game, when you got that first victory, like, was it a light bulb moment, or was it just like, was he slipping up, or did you finally did things start making sense in the game? Like, how did your learning curve, once you started beating him, how did that sort of transpire?
It wasn't so much a light bulb moment, but it was just things slowly starting to become clearer to me, like decisions being easier to make as well. So I'm not going to be looking at blocking with my 2 blocks when it's just irrelevant. Small things like that, that just adds up together.
Okay. And so you've been around in Flesh and Blood, obviously, since, the very early Sydney calling.
Yeah.
How have you seen the Sydney Flesh and Blood scene transform over since then? Like, what have you noticed? What are some things you've noticed? Like game growing, game changing, community, like events? Did you think a couple of years ago that you'd be bloody traveling to America to play in the first pro tour and there was a world, like, talk me through that, like the evolution that you've seen of the game in such a short amount of time.
I mean, the short of it is like it's just continued to grow and grow and grow, right? But in terms of the way it's grown, I feel like to some extent, there's just in Sydney, there's different pockets of players, which means that like there's just sub communities within a community. Not that there's no interaction between the communities, but I guess because Sydney's just sprawled out so wide, like that's just a natural thing, right? But one thing I found that's really great is that the communities are really close, both as a collective and in your individual pockets as well, which is something I really appreciate. Not in my old games, I used to be a very competitive player. Not to say that I didn't enjoy playing with those guys. Loved the community in those games as well. But I'm finding myself now, I still want to be competitive, but a part of me is also like, I just want to enjoy the game.
Yeah.
So I used to, especially when I first started playing Fab as well, I used to be a lot more poker faced when I play games, even in armories. It's just like a habit that I have. And I feel like more recently, I'm more willing to just sort of, take it easy, chat, joke around a little bit more, more than I used to anyway.
Something I did hear that about other card games. It's like at the high level competitive. Like if you and Hayden were rank 1 and 2 in another game, you would not be friends because it's like cutthroat. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. While like in Fab, that really doesn't exist. Like we get smashed by certain players all the time in locals. You know, it's really the same sort of 10 players that top every pro quest in our like there's differences, but it's like there's a group of very good players.
Yeah,
but no one really cares, or they're not assholes. Like none of them are people you can't hit up and go, hey, like, did I misplay, or can you give me some? You know what I mean? Like it's not cutthroat enough that we don't get that like camaraderie.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something I really appreciate. And I feel like every community sort of goes, oh, you know, this is such a great community, but I really do think so. This is true for the Flesh and Blood community in Sydney.
Yeah, well, I met you at my 3rd ever armory out there at RC Crew Games many moons ago.
Yeah, rest in peace, RC.
Rocking Hatchet Bolton back then.
Oh yeah.
I don't even remember what I was running back then.
First time I met Roy, he had a freaking spreadsheet out with all his foils that he's missing.
Bravo.
Like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm missing these foils. I'm like, dude, I have all those. I think that's the first interaction we had, is I got you some foils.
You smashed me with Bravo, OG Bravo in Blitz. I
I
still remember it. You absolutely creamed me, and I was running Hatchet Bolton.
That was I won't call it fun Bravo deck, but that was my fun Bravo deck.
Yeah. You play a lot of pet decks.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is cool, because if you played your best deck all the time, you probably win way more armories. You know what I mean? Yeah. But like, you'll go to an armory and you got like Oldham with like 3 potions of luck out. Like, what are you doing? And they're like, Earthlore bounty. I'm gonna pulverize for 14 for free. I'm like, oh, that's what you're doing.
I think locally I'm known as the player who tries to play Pursuit of Knowledge with Pummel.
Dude, I played my Dromai Pummel deck. That's an insane combo. Yeah. It's a blue, and then it's a Nourishing Emptiness without the downside, and you can pummel it. Exactly.
I've played Ninja Pummel as well.
Yes. That used to be a thing, right? Ira Pummel used to exist.
I'm not sure, actually. I can't remember. But yeah, definitely I think the key is Pummel.
I think Pummel, it's not underrated, right? But it's a generic. So I know someone that won, I don't know them, I've seen them online. Their deck list for like a top 8 Pro Quest on Dory had a blue Pummel and a Command and Conquer in the deck. And he would always pitch stack them. And that's how he got temper off Briars and things, or Phi. Because if you, by the way, there's no Phi or Briar in the world expecting a Pummel off a Dory. You know what I mean? But if you get Command and Conquer Pummel into an aggro deck, usually their arsenal is like an Art of War or a Tome. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you pummel a Command and Conquer into Phi and they lose an Art of War, how much damage is that representing really? Like, yes, you don't get to do your Dory thing, but the guy has some sense. Like, it's not, the whole deck is not pummels, but he's got that combo in the deck, and literally any deck in the game can run it.
Yeah, it's generic, and
it's very powerful.
The thing is, it's disruptive, right? And
which sometimes it's your only chance to win. Like, if you're a mid-range into an aggro, it's very tricky, or has been for a while, to get anywhere. But if you take 2 cards out of anyone's hand in Fab, that deck is not going to do well that turn.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's only so many heroes with disruptive abilities, and I think that's what makes Pummel quite attractive.
Talk to us about Pro Tour 1.
Oh, the nightmare.
Yeah, talk us about it. Like
the whole team
was a great trip.
Right?
Yeah,
the whole team didn't perform as well as they hoped.
But talk to us about the deck, how you guys came up with that deck, and talk us through. I find it quite interesting. And how you.
So I was doing a lot of my testing with Phil and with Fu as well, and we were all on the same deck, just working on that Lexi deck, and
a highly disruptive, taxing Lexi deck. Yeah.
So I think Phil was actually the first person to start playing Lexi. At the time, I think it went from a lightning ice build to just pure lightning, and at some point, with new cards, we started going more and more heavy ice. And at some point, I think earlier than that, we just went into all the green arrows. I think Phil's probably talked about that already. But yeah, basically the idea was Starvo was just predominant in the meta, and the idea was if they don't have a 4-card hand, then it's going to be very hard for them to fuse. So that's the premise of the deck, at least when I first started building it. And so effectively, I just wanted to play cards which made sure that they got rid of cards from hands. So
Like pay or discard.
yeah, so pay or discard, which is your Winter Splites. So I would prioritize those over an arrow, which Bravo can go, okay, Starvo can go, I'll just take it and I'll just come back, right? So that was sort of the idea going into the field. My first game just started horribly, and it just spiraled from there. So my first game was against Starvo. I was like, great, this is what I practiced for. And in practice, the deck felt quite, I mean, it was still inconsistent, but it felt consistent enough. And I was winning 50-50 against people who knew what I was doing. So I felt pretty comfortable. So in my first game against Starvo rather, can't remember the exact thing that happened, but effectively turn 1, I played Exposed to the Elements. I destroyed his Starvo's crown. I was like, great, I've got this game, right? And then next minute, next turn, my Starvo opponent goes Natural Fuse, Crippling Crush. Like, okay, that's
Ouch.
fine.
Yeah.
Ouch. So I basically lost a turn. I was like, okay, I'll come back from that. Next turn he goes Natural Fuse, Spinal Crush. Like, okay, all right, next turn, Natural Fuse, Spinal Crush again. Next turn, Natural Fuse, Spinal Crush again, and then capped it off with another Natural Fuse, Crippling Crush.
Yeah.
And naturally I lost that game. Right? I was like, I'm done. Right. So from there, after that,
With no crown. So he wasn't. That was
crown, it
luck.
was just
He
natural
wasn't
fuse.
fixing hands. Yeah, that's
I
crazy.
think first 2 fuses he was using a pulse, so it kind of made sense.
Yep.
But yeah, it was the fact that he drew into those
The best cards in the deck, nearly. Yeah.
Was
Only
what
worse
hurt.
is what Oakenold is worse. Would you
Yeah.
say?
Yeah. So I mean, yeah. So basically, it wasn't the fact that he was able to natural fuse; it was the natural fuse with the disruptive effects of those red cards. So after that, paired into an Oldham, which at the time was an auto loss matchup for me. So not much to say there, but I just died horribly. And then I think I faced a Viscerai, which I won against. And then I faced another mate, Frank from Canberra, which I tested with as well a lot. And I think he knew exactly what I was doing. We've play tested that match a lot, so he was able to beat me in that game. And from there, I just dropped.
Yeah.
Just because I wanted to play the calling the next day and just do other stuff because I was getting nowhere.
Do you feel like the deck choice was wrong, or do you feel like the meta was different than you expected, or is a big tournament like that just because everyone's quite good, it's just luck? Like there's that variance of what your matchups are.
I don't know if it was the wrong deck choice. I still feel like if I went back, I probably would make the exact same decisions. What I would say is maybe there was an issue with my playtesting, right? So in my playtesting, the deck was very consistent, and even if my opponent had some crazy turns, I was able to win some games. And on the not so much during the PT, but at the calling, I started getting into a lot of bad variance situations, and it just wasn't working out for me. But as far as the PT goes, I mean, I faced an Oldham, which I wasn't expecting too many of. I lost to bad variants against the Bravo player.
Yeah.
And Viscerai won, and then I lost to a mate. So I don't feel like I lost 3 out of 4 games. It's not a good showing, but I don't think that was necessarily because of a bad choice of deck. But with the calling the next day, I definitely ran into a lot of bad variants, and which was not the case in my testing. So maybe there was some issues with the way I was
But
testing.
Rangers sort of compared to Oldham or compared to Guardian in general, Ranger's way more susceptible to variance than a Guardian player is.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
which is why I probably am
Won't do it
shelving
again.
for now.
Azalea,
Anyway.
so
I
supposedly Azalea has some legs right now.
Look, I love the deck. I would still play it, but
Yep.
for now, I think I'm just going to shelve it and see what else comes out for Ranger.
So, Aussie Nats coming up.
Excited for it.
Rematch, Hayden versus Roy. How good would that be?
That would be fun. I would be keen for that.
Yeah.
Which means I make top 8, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Are you going to be?
Have you picked the deck?
Yeah.
I have not picked a deck. I have a short list, and it's definitely most likely going to be one of the Ice Heroes. So, Oldham,
Icelander, Lexi.
Icelander, and Lexi.
You like disruption.
Least like I like disruption. Yeah.
What's your views on the meta right now?
It's kind of hard to say. Was it? Haven't been keeping up with news, but apparently there was some news about Prism as well having actually.
I wouldn't. So it was ProQuest Season 1.
Yeah.
Supposedly they gave LL points to Starvo instead of Prism. My take on that, if that's true, is there's probably other mistakes. So if they went through it, but they won't go through every single, right? I don't think they'll change it.
Yeah,
She's 2 points off.
Okay. So.
But there's a chance that, correct, like there's Battle Hardens and Pro Tour calling and Battle Harden before Nationals. So
Yeah. Well, let's assume that Prism's still around, but
yep.
honestly, I'm not sure what to think of the meta right now. It's very broad. I think there's a lot of viable decks. Like you've got your Fies, which beat up on Prism. In my experience, loses to Oldham.
Yeah.
Right?
They lose to Dory, man. I still haven't been losing to Fi on Dory. It's amazing.
I feel like Viscerai is really strong right now, but and beats up on Prism, but Prism beats up on a lot of other decks.
Does Icelander absolutely cream Viscerai, though?
I wouldn't say creams, but I mean...
Does Scour not ruin Viscerai's life? If you don't know, people listening, if I'm right, Scour's the one that pops auras, right?
Yes.
So you can pay 1 for every rune chant, and they blow up as arcane into Viscerai. Is that correct?
Yes.
So if you Arsenal one of those when they do, what's that thing that makes
but I
4
mean, it
freaking...
depends on the situation and how you're playing.
Very
right?
situational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like...
It's not a good card to have in hand as Icelander if they have no rune chants.
Because, I mean, Viscerai can still come in with a lot of attacks, right? Like, just come in for 4, come in for another 4, and then 2/2 with the blade. And that's not counting rune chants. So are you spending all your cards to get rid of rune chants, blocking the arcane barrier, and...
Or disrupting instead.
Yeah, like it's situational.
Yeah.
It's definitely an interesting thought, but I don't know if I'd say it, it ruins Viscerai's.
I think it probably ruins OTK Viscerai's day, but that doesn't exist
That
anymore.
doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I mean, they can definitely build up rune chants, which they probably shouldn't.
But not the same level, right?
Yeah, not at the same level. Yeah.
Is there a rogue deck that you think has a spot in this
I
meta
think Icelander is the rogue
that
deck.
people aren't, hot on at the moment?
He
that you
doesn't
think-
want to give it up.
that you think would come
Can I
out.
suggest Dart at all?
I was just hoping you'd say Bolton. I'm not going to lie.
Fair enough.
Of all metas,
Bolton's a second to Dart at all.
Okay, we'll take that.
I think of all the metas we've had, you can play whatever you want right now. You know what I mean? Like, it's not... Bolton may not be the strongest deck, but it's not going to get 2-shot by Starvo either. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not... But to answer your question, I don't really know if there's any sleeper decks per se.
Yeah.
I think a lot of decks are viable. I'm choosing my decks just based on the least number of bad matchups. But that said, with the format where there's now Blitz taking up some of the games, like maybe that's not as important a decision point rather.
What would you play in Blitz at Worlds?
I have no idea. I usually
When was the last time you went to a Blitz Armory?
Sorry?
Yeah, I was going to say, when was the last time you played
When he
Blitz?
beat me.
Yeah?
I've been going a lot of Oldham in Blitz.
Okay.
So
It's still very good even without Crown.
Yeah, but it's a completely different deck.
You pitch in yellow earths. Is that what people do now?
I'm not sure. I haven't played Blitz in so long.
Because I think that's
I was
the build now without Crown is you go like yellow earth card, blue ice card. Did the double D react?
yeah, yeah.
And then
I mean,
know,
that was always possible,
was possible,
right? Like
yeah.
you usually just chuck into Autumn's Touch, and
Yes.
that acts as the double pitch.
Yeah.
I was entertaining the idea of using Peak in Autumn.
Yes.
Just going very defensive.
CC or
in Blitz.
okay.
It's not going to be a good deck, but I was just entertaining the idea.
I think that's where that helmet belongs. I don't think it's an Icelander helmet at all. Because Icelander can disrupt on your turn.
Yeah, yeah.
So it feels like maybe that type
it's
of
amazing
helmet is
in
like...
Icelander, though.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I just feel like it's probably, now that you don't have Crown and Blitz, it's very punishing to have to... Like, there's some decks that literally don't do much with 3 cards. Guardian's one of them. Like, Guardian loses the ability to pummel and stuff if it's a 3-card hand. You know what I mean?
But maybe it's a Lexi card.
Dude, if you play Peak in Lexi, imagine this guy wins Worlds. He's got Coronet Peak on Lexi, full blue deck. He's just
Unfortunately, that's probably not going to happen.
So, who's your favorite Australian Flesh and Blood YouTuber? That's what I want to know.
Oh,
He doesn't watch either of our channels.
Hit the
you can
button.
Tell.
Hit the button.
Which
Hit it.
one, team?
No.
Yazi!
Yazi!
how can I choose between the two?
Yazi!
Do you actually consume much content? Or mainly games.
Mainly games.
Yeah.
I do listen to podcasts mostly on commute.
Mm.
Or if I'm just working at home, then I just have on the side. So I'll be like sort of tuning in and out.
Yeah.
But I won't be really focused on it.
Arsenal Pass. Those guys are all right.
That was a legit cough.
We don't believe. Someone clipped that. Send that to Hayden. This is what Roy thinks of your podcast.
No, definitely like listening to them. Arsenal Pass is one of the ones I listen to on commute.
Mm. Oh, look, it's the premiere, I think, for competitive players. Because it's not super high level, nerdy, boring either. It's like anyone can listen to them and pick up a few things.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think actually what we discussed before is probably more valuable than most things I've heard about the game in general. Is those questions are probably the difference if you're going to get like big improvements in your game is asking those questions. Blitz and CC, where's this game going to go? Like, what's my game plan into that? What's he probably trying to do to me? Especially in your local like meta, you should know after a few weeks what people are playing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the question should be fit. Like, and if you don't know the answer, you're probably not paying enough attention and trying to like. Then you might prompt yourself to remember what Iceland is actually doing. How often, like, you know, is it frost hexes? Is it?
But there is a point in saying that you need to be careful of adapting your play style and your thought patterns to your local meta.
Oh, for sure.
When you go into a bigger event. That said, I mean, there's so many decks online and just so much of information available that to a certain extent you can probably do that. If you see an Icelander deck, you can probably expect it to be
roughly what you've seen online. I think it's more your local meta. Don't take any percentages out of it. Like, if you think there's not going to be a lot of Guardians because your local meta doesn't play a lot of Guardians, that's wrong. Because, like, Sydney, I remember when Starvo was all that, you wouldn't see that many Starvos at armories. Like, you know what I mean?
That's because Sydney's just full of prisms.
Well, but also just I don't think people care much to super spike every armory. Like, even at our secret, it never felt like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, yes, the good players tend to win, but I never... definitely Hayden would not be playing the same deck every week. He'd definitely be playing... Like, he'd bring Rhinar, even though it's not the strongest deck in the room. But he definitely... most people's priority was to have fun. And it still is in Sydney, most of the... Like, skirmishes and up, people want to win. Armories, you don't tend to get a good metric of, like, what the meta is.
I would confess I've been playing the same deck just non-stop, though, recently. I just... too lazy to build a new deck.
Well, it's also like if you're trying to get reps because
Yeah.
you know what I mean. You
Yeah.
shouldn't be switching. Like if you're pretty sure it's gonna be this deck you're playing at a pro tour or something, you shouldn't be. It's not the time to like build another deck.
I don't feel like going to armories to test is the best thing anyway.
Oh.
I feel like you just go to armories to have fun. If you're serious about testing, then you should be testing it separately, and the mindset and
Is different.
how you do it is quite different.
Explain that, if you don't mind. Say a bit more on that, just so people understand what you mean with mindset, with testing outside of...
Well, I mean, you can still do this with armories, but it's a lot harder because it's not planned and you can run into random decks, right? But with testing, you usually have a very specific goal in mind. I think they talk about it a decent amount in Arsenal Pass as well. But like you might be testing a specific matchup. You might be having trouble with that said matchup, and you want to try and work out how to work around it. So you might be adding a new card, seeing how that works, right?
Yep.
So you might not even, especially in the early stages of testing, you might not even be finishing your games. You'll be going, okay, five rounds in, okay, I've seen enough. This isn't working, or this is
I'm
working.
gonna lose, or I want to change what I'm doing.
I want to change something, and you start a new game. So it's literally you're testing and working out your strategy. You're not playing a game. Whereas in armories,
You finish the round. There's
you're
prizes.
finished.
Yeah.
How many times a week are you typically testing like that?
It really ranges, and it depends on people's availability. But we try to do at least 2 times a week. Depends on how free people are. Like we'll start at say 7:30 and get up to 10 o'clock at night. So not a lot of testing, but usually things ramp up as we get closer to events.
Do you go via the cams or TTS?
Depends again on everyone just has a different preference. I personally quite enjoy TTS. I know it's a little bit clunky and a lot of people have trouble with it, but personally I have no problems with it, so that's my go-to. I definitely don't have a great setup for webcams, but I do, because I have to use my phone as the webcam, so
It's annoying to use a phone as a webcam.
It's annoying. It runs really hot and it just kills my battery. So I try to avoid that, but otherwise...
I have a few you can borrow.
So what's your strategy into Uprising Draft? Because that's a bit harder to practice over webcam, I guess. What's your...
It's just in-person draft testing. Are you talking about...
Just broader strokes, yeah. What's your strategy? What do you think of the hero choices? Do you have a particular hero
Is
you
it
try
crap?
and force?
Because I think it's crap.
Here
I
we go.
think it's fine. I think it's okay.
I think it's fun. I'm not having fun with it competitively.
Okay, fair enough. I don't think I have anything new to say aside from what's already been said. Like, all 3 heroes are viable.
If you had a choice?
If I had a choice?
Yeah.
I definitely, personally, gravitate towards Dromai.
Okay, interesting.
The main reasons being that Phi tends to be picked quite highly, so I don't want to compete in that space. And I personally feel that Icelander is the weakest of the 3
Wow.
In draft.
in draft. I
Interesting.
think you can probably comfortably win like 2 out of 3 games per draft with Icelander, but if you're trying to win 3 out of 3, I find it very tough. But that's just a personal opinion. I could definitely be wrong, and I'm sure there's a lot of better Icelander players than myself. So those 2 things combined, plus just my
She's
sort of-
usually the least picked,
she's usually least picked.
which is crazy because it seems like you get less Icelander cards though, but people shy away from her, like from Dromai.
So Dromai I feel has an advantage over Icelander, but is weak against Phi. But I don't feel like it's an auto loss against Phi.
What do you so versus Icelander, you have some natural tools like your Ash Wings are just very good against Icelander. She doesn't have any good way to clear them, or and you get AB, right?
Yeah.
What's your what are you specific? So if you go Dromai, what are you specifically prioritizing to be able to beat Phi? What cards?
That would be, is it Centipede? The big
Embermore.
Embermore. Yeah.
They're 2 for 8.
2 for 8, yeah.
Yeah. That kills fire.
It doesn't have to be the red one, right?
No.
Any of them is amazing.
Blue is 6 anyway.
Blue is probably my favorite, actually.
Because you pitch it, blocks for 3. It's crazy good.
Yeah. I like blue followed by red and then yellow. But that's definitely the go-to card.
Because that's where I find... Second I draft Droma, I know I can 2-1 any draft. It's getting the fire win. Like, it depends. If it's only fire...
There's some really good dragons as well, right? Like, Yenderai is really annoying.
Yeah, and Kylori just forcing them to block is great. I think, I don't know, the format feels clunky. But I think also,
What do
I'm
you
only
mean by
drafting...
clunky?
You have, like, for a long period, there were people that just force their favorite hero because it's like a casual draft, right? But then it does feel like...
I mean, that's the case for any
Sure.
set, right?
But the clunky bit feels like, because the 3 heroes are so drastically different, their play style. Like, you have... Here's what I think. I think Fi is a little bit too strong in draft. Even when there's 4 Fis at the table, one of them tends to take the pod. Yep. Even with 4.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the easiest to build.
Because you can put 3 Phoenix. Yeah.
Right.
But it's not just okay. It's just naturally having that weapon, just having something to pitch into that swings, both the other decks don't have. So for variance and consistency, if you do get a crap hand on Fi, but there's a blue, you can literally, like, off 4 blues on Fi, still deal 8 to 10 damage and draw cards out of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and you're more okay with getting the yellow cards as well.
100%. Well, Dromai, if you, in the last draft, it was me versus Hayden. Like, I drew 2 hands in a row that were blue and yellow. Yeah. And I had 5 blues in the deck, but too many yellows. And it just doesn't work because you're not making Ash. They also don't hit for And Iceland, I think, is worse.
Yeah.
Like, you cannot draft the yellow spells. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, they're not enough value, and it's crazy hard. Like, a good Icelander deck wins at the pod, but, like, any mediocre Icelander can't, but a mediocre Fi can. Like, I feel like Fi has this massive, like, window of, it's okay, throw some jank in, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, I think in one of the Road to Nats, the draft ones, I think it was first pod, there was like 1 Icelander, and
Did
that
she win?
Icelander, no, it's still not.
Yeah, still not enough.
Not enough. Yeah.
Jeez.
Well, I don't think the best Icelander deck, like, I don't think a pre-constructed Icelander deck can necessarily beat a decent Dromai deck in draft either. Like, the draft we were at recently when I had double Uvia, like, what are you going to do? I'm just pitching every red I have and making 2 dragons a turn. And you don't have there's, like, no easy way to pop a 6 health dragon.
Don't even need to. I was playing that same RTN. I was playing Nick in the top 8, I think it was, and he had 1 Uvia out. I just died.
It's enough, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's just an engine. And that's what I mean. I think you could take like a blitz deck with no legendaries. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like 1 majestic and build it yourself, and you still struggle against Dromai.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Like a Themai is the same. It's like Themai's out. Now you literally have to take a turn off to deal with it, which is the whole point of Icelander is waning, mooning, twice a turn kind of thing. You don't even get to do that.
I did that to poor Hayden in one of the drafts. I played a Thermai against his Icelander, and then 2 turns later, played a second one.
I don't see in constructed. I don't even play it because when I make a blitz deck or a CC deck, I'm just not worried about Icelander enough to throw Themai in. I'm not even worried about Kano enough because with Sand Cover and Oasis, it's just so strong.
Just
against
Oasis
Arcane.
is enough to just really
That's what,
hurt.
yeah, but Sand Cover too, like so you can in the instant step
bad.
go 8, heal 1. Like it's 9 value for 1 resource.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can, with no Ash, pitch 1 into the Oasis, make the Ash for the Sand Cover. It's stupid.
Yeah.
I got Mitch. Hey, Mitch. Full red line Dromai, no blues. And I beat him because his Blazing Aether came in for 0 because he came in the Blazing Aether. For those listening who don't know, it counts the damage you've done for the turn and then adds it all into this spell, right? So, but he did 0 because he kept trying, and I either had an Oasis or a Sand Cover. So by the time, he found the Blazing off the top. So he's like, oh, cool. Puts it in Banish Zone, cracks boots. I'm like, here we go. But I had an Oasis and a Sand Cover.
It's kind of obnoxious how you have a deck that's just red, which is Kano's dreams. And
It's
still
not. It's not.
It's really
And then, by
sad.
the way, I did not have a Themai. If I did have a Themai, but it feels win more in Constructed. It feels like I don't need this dragon in the deck. I think it's actually better to have against like Guardians or anyone playing D-Reacts. Like, you have a Themai so that when you Kyloria, they can't sink. That's better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or they can't Oasis, or they can't Sand Cover. Like, it actually works in the mirror better than Wizard. Let Wizard... You actually want Wizard to get baited in.
Yeah.
The minute they pop their boots, or you just Pummel tie, as Paul well knows, just melt the boots. Because they never let them melt. They pop them in response. But you usually catch them at a time they don't want to. I don't think Kano wins without the boots. Like, it's very, very hard.
Very hard, yeah.
Because you're relying way more on your luck of the draw to do it.
So since you're a competitive player, like a very competitive player, high-level player, competing in Worlds, went to Pro Tour 1, second in Nats, calling top 8s, are you happy with the current Flesh and Blood OP structure? Is there anything that you would want to see changed or adapted moving forward through next year? Are you quite content with the number of possible Pro Tours we'll have and the way it's all structured?
I mean, honestly, I'm just happy to play.
Yeah.
And I think this was something you discussed with Phil in the previous episode, in terms of having split limited and constructed.
Okay.
If honestly, I quite like that idea personally. It just tests something different, right? Like, it's you're testing with, especially with the Worlds format now, with Blitz as well. It's sort of like the best overall player versus if you have constructed and limited split, it's your best limited player and then your best constructed player. So I mentioned before, I feel more comfortable with constructed, so that's so maybe that's sort of reason why I'm gravitating towards. I like this idea. But that said, I'm happy with any format. Just happy to play.
To be honest, I my opinion on that is the game's not big enough. Like, let's say you're gonna get 1,000 people at a pro tour.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't feel like as a company they would want to split the player pool, because right now you don't have a very known king of constructed and a known king of... Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm telling you now, if they ran constructed only pro tours and every single time Hayden Dale won, there'd be an argument to go split format, because you go, there's clearly like, or it's constantly the same, like 8 people or 16 people alternating. Because I think Magic has some of that, is like, the game's been out for so long and the pro scene's fairly well established. There's clearly people like that should be playing draft because they're like that natural talent, that the reps that they've put in. But I just feel like the game's too small, because I'd also love to see a world champion at Blitz. Like, I'd love to see it, because it's like chess. Chess has that, right? It's like got the fast format. It's a whole different skill set to the is there unlimited time games in chess? I think there is. Is that called classic in chess?
Not the events I played were the longest.
I think competitive always have they have a time limit just because they got to televise the thing, right? But it's usually like 3 hours is enough time to sit and think. Like, they sit and think for half an hour, don't they? Like, they calculate, and then they play 10 moves really quick. But I'd love to see imagine going to Pro Tour and there's like Blitz and there's a champion. Just Blitz. Because, by the way, they already have that. Like, there was a Commoner event, big prize on the line. There was a UPF event, big prize on the line. They obviously do cosplay, which is a whole side of the community, it's competitive, just not the cardboard. It wouldn't be, if they had 5,000 people at an event, it would be super smart to go, there's a Blitz calling. I'd actually much rather see like a team blitz calling.
Yeah.
That was really fun. But yeah, it'd be like a whole world championship for draft at the same time. Like you get to pick and just let all the very good draft players.
Yeah.
Not even that. Let people play their favorite format.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? No one has to feel like
I do like that they have. I know it's not. The game hasn't been going on long enough to get a true ELO read, but I do like that the pathways of qualification are split between constructed ELO and limited ELO. So
Thank
that
God
means,
for that.
yeah. So that means moving forward, like we will see those people that are limited specialists be able to enter into these high-level events through that pathway. Now, yes, if they don't practice some sort of constructed, whether it's classic or blitz, they're going to bomb out. But I still think that's a good thing to reward people that are a master of a certain area. Because the same thing, like you said, was in Magic. There were people that were limited masterminds, and then you had other people that were just constructed masterminds. But in saying that, the limited masterminds were still very good. They were still very good at constructed.
You never really only play one format. Like, especially locally, no one's going to only ever do draft. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's also your favorite way to play, Like, maybe you just hate drafting that set. You know what I mean? But also, from a balancing perspective, maybe the set's not balanced. Like a set can be, the constructed meta could be very good and the limited one's not as good.
Yeah,
and the last thing you want to do is start banning or restricting cards in limited. Like, that ruins the format where you have to go, you can't even draft that card, or that card's been errated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which happened to a couple of sets.
Yeah.
Although with all the bans so far, you were able to play the cards. Like Duskblade, you could play in limited if you'd... Man, imagine that. It'd be so good. Can we do an Tales of Aria draft one time where I get a Duskblade? I want to see how it goes.
Do you have a favourite Flesh and Blood set?
I mean, I like different sets for different reasons. If I had to pick just an overall favorite set, I don't know, maybe just the first set. I don't know if it's nostalgia or because it's
very fun.
Because it's the first set and there's a limited card pool, it's more, in quotes, balanced. But just really enjoyed that set.
Well, that was the first set I ever liked the draft, was WTR, when they did the farewell events. I was like, wait, this is like easy. You know what I mean? Like, I have to think of fusing and elements. It's like, want to play warrior, you can still run generics. You can still, put a flock in the deck or a scarf or a scar. It just works. Like, there's no, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You still had your moments with, like, Guardian. You had your big attacks, but then Guardians, you could run scarf for a scar or whatever. Like, it just all works. And I think Uprising's closer to that, where it's...
Yeah.
I nearly never have a deck with bobbles, unless, like, the draft was really weird, like 4 people switched midway, you know what I mean? That's only happened to me once. So in all fairness...
There was a guy at the Canberra.
Yeah, he had like 8 or something.
It was in my pot of 5. He had 9 baubles.
How
I don't know how that happened.
He switched. It must be
put
like,
up his hand, and so I was in that wacky pot of 5, and not a single person
I remember
drafted Dromai.
Yeah.
So it was this fine Icelander out of the 5 of us, and he was one of the Icelander players, and he literally said, "Judge, I need crack bauble."
Guarantee you he
and
had
the
like
judge,
12 Dromai
The
cards.
judge went to give him one. He goes, "No, I need more." And the judge goes, "How many?" He goes, "I need 9." And the judge just I could see in the judge's face was like, "Did you just say 9?" He did not know how to respond. I forget what your name is, but shout out. That was so funny. We were all laughing. It was a good time.
I had a casual draft with Hayden and some of the other guys as well. And I think this was at the team calling. So it was like second draft. I think I drafted Dromai at the time from memory, and I had to put 4 crack baubles in my deck.
It's just, you can avoid it. It usually means you kept yourself open for a little bit too long and other people switched, and it just makes it awkward. But really, if you pick within the first 3 picks, if you decide what hero you're going, you don't need baubles.
But that said, I think I did forget that I can run Phoenix Flames there.
Man, Transmogrify on Dromai is another. You want to absolutely decimate Phi. You go, again, blue, yellow, or red, Transmogrify. into Phoenix Flame into Embermore is 16. Like you go, and you only have to pitch a blue to do the whole thing.
Yeah, I actually tried to build similar to that in a draft on Wednesday. So I had a few cards which worked with Phoenix Flames. So had Transmogrify, I had one Phoenix Flame in the deck, and I had a few of the Draconic cards which
To go fetch or whatever.
fetch and stuff. It worked okay. Like I think need a bit more testing in how that kind of deck works.
It's decent in the mirror because you can pop Ashwing. Like you can summoning an Ashwing is much harder than using a Phoenix Flame as your second attack, right?
Yeah.
And if you just put a Phoenix Flame in Arsenal, when you got dragons out, you can block with your whole hand. Phoenix Flame for 0, then every dragon.
But it can also be really awkward against Fly just because
Doesn't block.
how aggressive they are, right?
And it doesn't block.
Yeah, they just don't block.
Yeah.
They can do more damage than you still somehow. Like consistently.
I would never run 3, but I would run them over bobbles. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think one's
But
probably
usually you're
max.
better off with some red generics than you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. But 1 or 2, depending, how many Draconic you drafted. Maybe that's also why I don't do well in draft. I usually, I go to Dromai for similar reasons. I like playing her. And usually you're 1 of 2 or 1 of 3. So it's fine.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe part of the weakness is I'll flock to a Illusionist card before I pick up. Like I don't have a strategy around the Draconic Phoenix Flame interactions, which help you go wide. And, I don't really build
I don't
into
feel
those.
like you really need it.
No, but sometimes you have to.
Yeah, sure.
So I'll take them, but I'm not really playing around. Like I'm not thinking of how to maximize like a Rupture card or something.
Yeah.
Although I did build a meme deck. So I built a Pummel Dromai. I don't know if you watched it.
Mentioned it.
But I built a Dromai deck where as long as you have 1 Ash, you once you draw a Rake, you do the Rake trick where you pitch 1 into Rake, then pitch into the chest, and you make 3.
Yeah.
Why do we need the Ash? I'm trying to think. Yeah, that's right. And then you go 1/1/1. Then you crack your gloves to make the 4th. Now you have 4 Draconic Chain Links.
Okay.
Then you go Tome, Rupture card. Like it. And I did it against a friend of mine on TTS, and I pitched a Blooded Drakai into it. And then I went Centipede. Off Tome, I drew 2 two Dune Breakers. So like you end up going like 9 attacks deep. It's very like if you're gonna play that way, you play fight, right? You don't need to try to do it on Droma, but people just don't expect that you get the 4 Draconic Chain Links off the Ashwings, and then you have this whole
back on drafts. So if you're finding yourself with a lot of rakes, like it's not a bad idea, as you said, to have the Rupture cards as well. Like
that's what, yeah. They're very strong because most people will leave that. Like if you got 3 dragons out and not much else, they'll ignore them.
Yep.
And then you have a free 4th Draconic. It turns on your Phoenix Flame. It turns on Rupture cards.
I've definitely played 1 or 2 Rupture cards here and there in my Dromai and pulled it off.
Especially the one that blows up Arsenal. Mind you, that's the crazy thing too. Fi wins and never has to Arsenal. That pisses me off. Even at the world premiere, I'd be like, I was playing Icelander in Sealed.
Yeah.
And like the 5 players wouldn't Arsenal. They just attack. And I'm like, you're playing aggro. You got to Arsenal a card and come big, right? I'm obviously wanting to freeze their Arsenal. But that's not why they weren't doing it. It's just the deck does so much damage without an Arsenal. Briar can't do that. Like Briar's very like mono red aggro, but Briar has to Arsenal to have a big turn, And I think
they need heroic to have a big turn, right?
No, but they still like you want an Arsenal on Briar to really have a proper turn.
Fi wants an Arsenal, right? Like they don't need it, but
but
it's
that's actually
it's a
part
cherry
of
on the top.
That's crazy to me is that you can like win a game and never have to use that. I was like, what's going on? Mind you, smart 5 players. Not that there's that many of them, but smart. No, in constructed, you don't play Fi in constructed.
Oh hell no.
Yeah. Smart 5 players will use.
Like, what are you doing?
They'll use the Fi ability, fetch the Phoenix Flame, Arsenal it. That's 99% of the time the right play instead of poking me for 1.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Because that can be your chain starter. So if you draw and one of the cards says has to be the second, like if you played a red card this turn, do this.
Yeah, hedgelongs.
You really want that Phoenix Flame for 0 immediately. Or if you have a, Spreading Flames, it's already 1. So you can play Spreading Flames and immediately into your Phoenix Flame. So a lot of like fire players miss that you should arsenal that Phoenix Flame. That you're not getting value out of, you're just poking for 1.
Yep, absolutely.
You're better off with a 5th card next turn.
Yeah, especially if you have only 1 Phoenix Flame in your grave, then it doesn't matter, right? But if you have 2, then it makes a big difference potentially.
Yeah, it just but also it will fix your hand being able to play a red.
Yeah.
You start with a Draconic Chain Link. You know what I mean? Like that's the point.
Yeah.
Also,
fair.
you can play it for 0, pass, respond with a Art of War, deal a free damage anyway. But again, you've got a combat chain started.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's way trickier than just every time end a combat chain poke for 1. Like that 1 doesn't win you the game ever, but I feel like having it will fix more hands than dealing 1 will.
Yeah,
you
no,
know?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Guys, I've got to go. I got a lot of stuff to do.
It's been awesome.
We're an hour 46 minutes in.
I feel like I'm a better Flesh and Blood player.
I learned something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's
And
good
to be
know.
honest, if you ever get the time, so the data thing's interesting. If you ever make a tool that people can like punch in. Also, if you need help with stuff like that, like I'm sure we can find community members that are willing to chip in. Even if that's type of data tool you'd like access to something. So AI learning stuff, especially, would marry up very well with people like Felt Table or Flesh and Blood Online that have a basic AI that plays the game. Because in a perfect world, they slap that info into a supercomputer and run it for 1,000,000 years in an hour, and then we get a lot of data. You know what I mean? But if you ever like want to do that, let me know.
Yeah, for sure.
We can help. But the other thing with the questions, I think like Chris Bewley, because you're probably watching, invite this man to write an article about that. I'm serious. You don't get people talking about what questions to ask. And it doesn't need to be complex, but exactly what we discussed would make a great Fab TCG article or a Wraith Times article. Like this is how I approach the game. I sit down. This is the pre-game questions. 1, 2, 3. These are my turn questions. These are the questions I ask on there. But that's like building that kind of flowchart, logical. Because then, see, those things you could actually repeat and become a better player. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think working in the jobs you do, maybe the way your brain's wired is why you do the work you do. That logical, that logical way of thinking and problem solving is robotic to a point, but it works if you just keep repeating. Because reps alone are not good.
Yeah.
Reps
you
with
need to be
a plan
thinking about it.
which is why I think you are a very good player. And I think those questions would help a lot of people. Man, some people print that shit out and go to an armory and be like, okay, that. And that's a good way to learn to be better. What do you think?
I think, the first question I'll be looking at is my opponent hot?
I mean, that's always the
Should
guess.
I ask them out for a drink?
Remember, the one guy at the table that's married is the guy with these questions.
Anyway, just having some fun. No, thanks, Roy.
What's the
Appreciate
game? Smash, kill, or pass? That's
Alright,
his question.
I haven't heard of that before.
He says.
But no, it's always good hanging out with you,
Yeah, Roy,
Roy.
appreciate
I really
it.
enjoy it all the time. So,
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Anything from you?
yeah, just
Princess Spike playmats to get you to Worlds?
we've been selling so many of them. Thank you, everyone.
I get
that's
compliments
bought 'em.
when I play on it.
Yeah, geez, I've been flying out the door. I think I've got about 20 left.
Okay.
So we're chewing through them.
They can hit you up on Twitter, Insta.
Yeah, wherever. I'll ship it all over the world, or I'll bring it to Worlds. I booked my flights to San Jose
Well,
today.
technically, if you order one in the next 24 hours and you want it in Singapore or Lille, he can give it to me.
Well, okay.
I don't mind. Free shipping. Well, people will have not a lot of time because this posts tomorrow. But if you're quick, ask Paul, hey, can you give it to John? And if he says yes, then I'll come and see you tomorrow night, pick up whatever people order.
Sounds like
Because
a
I'm
plan.
taking a whole bunch. Man, my bag is half full. And then people realize they could ask that this is not, you do not do this. I'm not helping any more people, but I'm going to say the Prism artist, you can order the playmats offer and give them my name to pick up. So there's like 7 playmats waiting for me. Like at some point they get heavy, you know, in the suit.
yeah.
So they got to come with me from Singapore to Lille, from Lille back to Sydney. So I think the idea is maybe don't pack super light, super heavy.
I took like 35 tall Timmy playmats to New Jersey, and those things weigh a lot.
That's what I mean. Like, I don't want to, but also I don't want to take, anyway, I might end up shipping from Singapore to Sydney before I leave. Like, just.
Makes sense.
They're not fragile, just wrap them up, but it's fine. All right, guys, we're going to sign off. Please sub if you haven't. There might be a gap of a couple of weeks of episodes because I'm away for 2 weeks. But there'll be a big episode when I get back. Maybe we'll see. Hayden Dale might.
Remember, I've got the login details. So when the cat's away, the mice will
Yeah,
play.
no.
So you might get a little sneaky little video from me in HQ up on
why
Thunder.
not? Why not?
Yeah.
Easy. All right. Appreciate you, Roy.
Hey,
Thank you.
Anything you want to say, Roy, quickly?
Yeah,
Before you go?
any
Anyone you want
shout-outs?
to shout out? Where can people find you?
I don't really use social media, so
Smart man.
Very smart.
But yeah, just shout out to the whole Sydney Fab community, I guess.
Yeah, wicked.
And obviously all my testing partners.
And the Canberrians. We love them down in
yeah,
Canberra.
absolutely, 100%.
All right.
Thank you.
Cheers, Roy.
Thanks.